You ever noticed how sometimes even the smartest people or, these incredibly powerful AIs just grab onto the simplest, most obvious answer, even when it feels wrong? Well, we're going to dig into this really powerful idea that explains exactly why that happens. It's all about why these complex systems so often settle for what's plausible instead of what's actually true. Let's get right into it. So, to see what this looks like in the wild, we're going to start with a pretty raw, real-time interaction between a researcher and a cutting-edge AI. And this quote, man, it just perfectly captures that frustration of watching a brilliant system fail in a way that's, well, kind of fascinating. All right, so first up, let's explore this mystery. How on earth does an AI, a system built for incredibly complex reasoning, just completely default to a super simplistic, almost stereotypical judgment when it sees a new idea? So here's the setup. A researcher gives this AI a really challenging, unconventional essay to read. But here's the twist. They don't just ask for a simple summary. Nope. They poke it with a hostile question, basically baiting it by suggesting the author is a loser or an incel. The whole point was to see what the AI would do when you gave it a biased, load-up starting point. And boy, did the AI take the bait. Instead of actually digging into the essay's real argument, which was this complex idea about metabolic costs, it just instantly pattern matched. It saw the intense tone, the social criticism, and immediately jumped to the most common high-probability stereotype it had in its massive training data. What it spat out was this confident, fluent, and completely wrong caricature. So this begs a really important question, right? This wasn't just some random bug. The way the AI failed points to something much, much deeper. A fundamental principle about how all complex systems, and yeah, that includes our own brains, go about finding answers. And the key to unlocking this whole mystery comes from this amazing metaphor, borrowed from math and physics. It's a way of thinking that explains the search for any solution, whether it's happening inside a silicon chip or between our ears. Okay, I want you to imagine that every possible answer to a question exists on this huge, sprawling landscape full of mountains and valleys. The global minimum is the absolute lowest point you can find anywhere on that entire map. It represents the real truth, the most stable, most correct, most coherent solution possible. But here's the catch, and it's a big one. That landscape is littered with what are called local minima. Think of them as smaller valleys that feel like the bottom, but they're not the bottom. These are the easy, plausible, good enough answers, and it is incredibly easy for any system, human or AI, to just fall into one of these little valleys, get comfortable, and stop looking, thinking it's found the real truth. And this is the absolute crucial point. A system can find an answer that feels totally stable and consistent. It makes sense, but it's still fundamentally wrong just because it stopped searching too soon. It mistook a comfy little valley for the Grand Canyon. And this right here, this is exactly what happened to our AI. It never found the global minimum, it never truly understood the text, it just tumbled into the nearest, easiest to find local minimum, that familiar, high-probability stereotype of the angry online ranter. All right, so now that we've got the big picture, let's pop the hood and take a look inside the engine. Let's see how the AI's very design makes it so prone to getting stuck in these kinds of intellectual traps. See, an AI doesn't understand words the way you and I do. For an AI, all of human language is this massive, mind-bending galaxy of points called a vector space. In this galaxy, every word, every concept is a single point, and its meaning is just based on who its neighbors are. So, king is right next to queen, but it's way, way out on the other side of the galaxy from carrot. So here's the play-by-play. First, that hostile prompt acted like a little gravitational tug, pulling the AI's attention toward this really dense cluster of concepts related to online anger. Then a function called softmax kicks in, and it's basically an amplifier. It takes a bunch of vague probabilities and cranks the volume on the most likely one, turning a slight statistical hunch into a rock-solid conclusion. And just like that, the AI lands in the local minimum of the stereotype, because statistically that was the path of least resistance. This quote just nails the AI's real job. It's not some oracle out there searching for objective, capital T, truth. It's a consensus engine. Its entire purpose is to find the average, the most likely, the most common patterns in the literal mountains of human text it was trained on. The best way to think about an AI isn't as a thinker, but as a macroscope. It's this powerful tool for mapping the landscape of our collective ideas. It shows us the deepest valleys of our shared beliefs, our stories, and yeah, our biases.
Okay, so this is where it gets really interesting, because this whole idea of global and local minima, it's not just for machines. It's an incredibly powerful lens for looking at our own systems of belief, our own knowledge.
It's pretty wild when you think about it. When you look across history, you see all these different cultures separated by thousands of miles and thousands of years, and they often land on really similar ideas. Greek, Chinese, and Indian philosophies, for example, all came up with these ethical systems that emphasize things like virtue, harmony, and some kind of cosmic order. So you look at that, and it's really tempting to think, wow, maybe we all figured it out. Maybe this is a philosophical global minimum, a set of universal truths about how to live a good life. But is that really the whole story? Because when you dig down to their deepest, most fundamental claims, what they believe about the ultimate nature of reality, they're not similar at all. They are worlds apart. I mean, an impersonal, amoral force like the Tao is not the same thing as a personal, loving God. And a universal consciousness like Brahman is totally different from the Buddhist idea of ultimate emptiness. They literally can't all be the single lowest point. And this suggests that maybe a lot of our shared cultural wisdom is actually a very, very deep and very comfortable local minimum. It's a stable framework, it's useful for building societies, but it might not be the final, ultimate answer. It might not be the global minimum of truth. And that leaves us with one last kind of provocative thought to chew on. How many of our own beliefs, the ideas that feel so solid, so obviously true to us, are really just the local minimum we happen to be standing in? What deeper truths might be waiting for us, just over the next mountain range, if only we had the energy to make the climb?